All right, welcome to the Prop Talk podcast, where we talk about all things boats. Today, I've got David from Paugus Bay Marina. He is the Lake Region's exclusive formula dealer. David, why don't you introduce yourself?
What's going on, everybody? I'm David. I'm the sales manager over at Paugus Bay Marina. I've been there for quite some time, doing a couple different jobs. Being the sales manager over there, I've been there for probably 2 years now.
Yeah.
Loving it. It's great.
And Dave, you started in the marine industry like a lot of guys. So you started as a dockhand. Tell us, there's a lot of dynamics that happen, once you get out of high school. You say, hey, listen, I want to be this, I want to be that. What made you stay in the marine industry, or did you?
Yeah, so coming out of high school, I had absolutely no idea what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
Like, at all. No clue. Everyone asked me, like, what do you want to go to college for? I don't know. So I went to college starting off as a liberal studies major for my first year so I could kind of figure out what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
Gave me a little bit of a buffer. So I was going to Endicott and then transferred over to University of Tampa. And during that time, in 2017, I was working seasonally on the gas dock over at Irwin Marine in Laconia, doing the rentals and the gas dock there. And then the year after that, I bounced over to Mountain View Yacht Club, working the gas dock, various jobs over there. I never said no to anything, which is probably what really helped diversify me as an employee. I was taking the shrink wrap off of the huge boats, driving the golf cart around, valet. I actually learned how to drive the forklift over there. That was the first forklift I ever drove. They let some young kid do that.
One thing that I tell everyone in the marine business, specifically guys in sales, is don't let anyone know that you run the forklift.
Oh, yeah.
Because then you live on it.
Yep. Yeah, that's absolutely true. Every time someone needs a break on the forklift, I'm the first guy they go to.
Unfortunately, that's the case most places you go.
But what's really unfortunate is I just love driving it. It's so much fun, dude. It's so much fun.
It's kind of like one of those things where it's like, I know you have a girlfriend, fiance. Is it girlfriend or fiance?
Girlfriend. Yeah.
It's like when she says, I'll do the dishes, I'll run the forklift because it's going to get done right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, every time we need to shuffle boats around, I'm like, for display purposes, for what we have in our inventory, I'm like, hey, we need to move this over here. Like, great, go get on it.
Yeah.
Like, okay, so now I got to do all of it.
So working your way up in the ranks, what was your first management position that you were in? And, what are some things that caught you by surprise?
Yeah, so this is my first management position. So I started on the gas dock, worked seasonally through there, and then, kind of bounced out of the industry and came back. So what's really caught me off guard, which I think is different and specific towards my position, is I'm the only one in my department. I'm a team of one. So if a boat needs to get cleaned, I'm the one who does it. If a boat needs to get sold, I'm the one that does it. If a battery needs to be replaced, I'm the one that does it. So the volume of work taking on this position was kind of what was the biggest hurdle for me to get over, because it's not like I can just say, yeah, we'll take that boat in, send it to the cleaning department, and then put it up online. Like, I'm the one who cleans it. I'm the one who takes the photos. I'm the one who lists it. I take all the calls. I do all the negotiations, and I'm the one who's delivering it. So if it needs to go to Wolfboro, I'm the one driving it up there.
That's one of the biggest misconceptions with boat dealers, is that a lot of folks that buy a boat expect it to be similar to an experience when it comes to buying cars. And it couldn't be further from the truth. So I work with a number of different dealers, and I would say more than half of boat dealerships are a one-man band. Sometimes a two-man band. Maybe you've got a brother, a couple brothers that own a dealership that will work together, and maybe one guy sells, one guy does service, or they kind of interchange. But what is the biggest challenge being a one-man band?
The biggest challenge being a one-man band, honestly, it's managing the time. That's the hardest part, because if I schedule, let's say, 4 demos in a day, and my 10 a.m. demo shows up half an hour late, that messes up my whole day.
Yeah.
I can't, say to the people coming in at 11:30, I'll just go over with these guys. I have to make them wait, and then I have to make the next people wait, and the next people wait.
Domino effect.
Yeah, it's tough with the schedule. So being able to spend time one-on-one with someone and being completely there for them, while knowing what's going to happen with killing all this time is kind of the hardest balance. Is I want to really make sure that when I'm with a customer, I'm with them 100%. I'm not checking my phone. I'm not trying to look at things elsewhere, be distracted. But knowing that I got to kind of get you in, get you out, because we burned a little bit of time.
Yeah, time management is one of the biggest problems that most marinas face because you figure, we're open year round, but 90% of our business happens between the months of March and June.
Yeah, once the snow starts melting, that's when people start calling.
And one of the biggest misconceptions is that, at least in our area, everything shuts off sales-wise. I would say, it doesn't shut off, but a majority of our business shuts off after the July 4th holiday.
Yeah, it does taper down quite a bit. It slows down. There is a huge lull there, and then it kind of picks back up a little bit, at least from what I see. It's kind of people looking to get that deal at the end of the year.
Yep.
And then a lot of what we do is taking on inventory because we do consignment.
Yeah. So you guys are a formula dealer.
Correct.
How long have you guys had formula?
We have had formula since 2009.
2009. So you picked it up from another dealer, right?
Correct. It was over at Lakeport Landing, and then it transferred over to us.
Okay, so they forfeited the franchise. But what's something about what's a fun fact about formula that most people don't know?
Fun fact about formula is it's actually very, very customizable. So with your dash, a lot of people think you can't do anything with it. It just comes the way it comes. I can take any gauge and put it in any spot. So if you want your RPMs on the left and your speedometer on the right, I can do that. And if you just want a screen, I can do that. But if you don't want to screen at all, I can do that as well, which is a super cool thing that I don't think many other brands offer.
No.
And that's something that, is really cool where you can tailor it to like a specific person and get it to be exactly the way they want it.
And some of their finish work in terms of how they, most boats are gel coat. I knew that they use different materials or finishes on the final top layer of the fiberglass.
Yeah.
It's not gel coat, right?
It's Emerald paint.
Emerald paint.
Yeah.
And what makes Emerald paint better than gel coat?
So it doesn't fade. Like it really doesn't. It's really surprising to look at formulas and you have a hard time telling what year it is because you can't see the wear and tear as long as there's not huge gouges in it, obviously.
Yeah.
But you just wash it, you wax it, and it's good. You maybe need to do every other year.
So Emerald paint, it's like a 3 or 4 stage paint. Your base coat, then you got your primer, base coat, clear coat, and they probably do a few layers of clear coat.
Yeah.
So that's actually interesting. I've seen a ton of old formulas, and all of them look great. And it's interesting now that you mentioned that because I never really thought anything of it. You look at boat brands, there's somewhat of a following of each brand. And, if I'm talking about, not that I'm hating on a brand like Bayliner, but if you're talking about a Bayliner, you look at a 20-year-old Bayliner, you can kind of guess what it's going to look like. And it usually doesn't look great. And when you think of a formula, you think, all right, well, that's someone who spent a lot of money on that boat, maybe ordered it. He takes really good care of it, but he may not just be taking great care of it. He may have a good boat to take care of in terms of aesthetics. So that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And previous to Formula, you guys were a Bryant dealership.
Correct.
So Bryant, I'm a little bit in the dark about Bryant. I mean, maybe you can shed some light on the history of Bryant or what you do know.
Yeah, I didn't work with Bryant for a long time because they shut down during COVID. Unfortunately, honestly, they were a great mid-level boat. I mean, they were up and coming. They were trying to make a name for themselves, so their quality was really high, but their price wasn't. So they were really trying to make a name for themselves. And just simple bow riders from 22 to 25 feet. And they were a great, great complementary boat to Formula because we would have people come in who wanted let's say a 24-foot Formula, but the price tag on that is significantly higher. But then we say, well, check out this Bryant. And they're really simple. There's not a whole lot to them, but they still handle the chop really, really well because they have such a deep V. And then they're also pretty customizable as well. They had some very cool paint. They would fade because they didn't have the Emerald paint, but they had the typical fiberglass. But, over time they'd show their age, but they really run well. Super simple motors in them with the Mercuries, like the 6.2 liter. I mean, those things are bulletproof. And then just super simple stuff. And I really have nothing but great things to say about them.
So Bryant was bought by, I believe, Polaris.
I'm not 100% sure.
I believe that Bryant was bought by Polaris. They did that with a few different brands, and then when COVID came, they just cut the cord.
Yeah.
That
They
happened.
closed the factories down because they didn't want to put the people inside the factories and keep everybody quarantined, and then they just didn't have the overhead to open it back up.
Crazy.
Mm-hmm.
The one of the interesting things is that that's happened with a number of different boat brands. I don't know if you remember Seven Marine.
No.
It was some of the viewers or listeners might know what this is, but Seven Marine was an outboard company owned by Volvo. And instead of making an inboard, they made an outboard with the Chevy LS platform. And they were like 600 horsepower. Seven was their own marine. Volvo bought them. And within a year or two, Volvo had basically bankrupt the company.
There you go. Sometimes you'll have that.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit more about Paugus Bay Marina. It's one of the things that's cool about this area is that there's not a lot of written history on some of these marinas, and they've been around a long time.
Yeah.
I mean, tell us a little bit about Paugus Bay Marina.
So Paugus Bay opened their doors in 1995 under Kevin Keenan, which that last name will probably be familiar because the current owners are Chris and Corey Keenan.
Interesting. So family business?
Family business. So Chris and Corey, their uncle, Kevin, was the one that opened the marina, and he started it actually as a valet-only marina.
Huh.
So a lot of the businesses or marinas around here were doing in-water slips, and he didn't do that to start off, and that's where everything's transitioned to, which is why I would probably say we're really set up for where the market is shifting to, especially in our area where there's not as many boat slips in the water, but there's so many now out of the water with valet.
That's a really good point you bring up because there's only so many slips in the lake. And that wasn't, that was the case 10 or 15 years ago, but the demand for slips was not as high as it is today. So if you were someone that's not from the area, maybe you want to keep your boat on the water, 10, 15 years ago, it was pretty easy.
Yeah.
And if marinas didn't have a spot for you, chances are you could find someone that did have a slip that would rent it to you. Now it's completely shifted. I mean, it couldn't have shifted any more drastically than it has. You've got marinas that have, some of them at one location have 200 valet spots.
Yep.
We know the reason why the market has shifted, but what are some of the problems you're seeing from this sort of, in-water slip to valet, and what suggestions would you give someone who's getting into or exploring getting into valet?
So this is kind of the way I do sales is I talk to you and I try and find out who you are, what you like to do, and what you're looking for in a boat. And so I look at that avenue as the same as how I look at where I'm going to place you in the system, whether that's valet in a boat slip, different kind of stuff like that. I'll talk about the positives of valet is that our building is indoor stored through the summer and the winter. So you're out of the sun and you're out of the water. The downside of that is if you want to go out at 8 p.m. at night, you can't do it because we're not there. We really try and extend our hours, so we never leave anybody out in the water. We make sure we have enough slips for if, we got 26 slips in the water. If we have 28 boats out, we wait until we have enough slips for everybody to come in. So that's kind of the nice thing is that your boat's out of the water and it's out of the sun, which are the two worst things for the boat, believe it or not. So you don't get those damages, but the catch with that is you don't get to keep your boat in the water all the time for 100% use. If you want to go out at 5 a.m., you got to call us, let us know that we got to put it in the day before.
I would say flexibility is definitely the biggest fall, but that's one of the biggest drawbacks, I should say, to having your boat in valet. But I would say one of the biggest positives is that the boat's not in the water 24/7.
Yeah.
And you and I both know that a boat that sits in the water every year from Memorial Day till Columbus Day looks a lot different than the boat that sits on a boat lift or is in valet.
Yeah, especially when you put a water meter to it. You get some hot spots in there with some moisture. So that's kind of the cool thing. You don't really get the fading as much with the sun beating down on it.
Yeah.
It is a lot different, but obviously there's some boats that you just can't do it with.
Yeah.
We cannot valet a 33-foot boat. It's just, we cannot pick them up.
Yeah, and you're not the only one. So really the only markets that I've seen are capable of valeting big boats like that are like the very southern states, like Florida, Georgia, where they've got some really, really big facilities and, gantry lifts and a number of different types of lifts that pick these boats up and drop them down. Speaking of storage, You guys store both indoors and outdoors, right?
Correct. We mostly do indoor storage. There's probably 5% of our customers who are outdoor.
And those types of boats consist of mainly what kind? Like older boats?
Older trailer boats, smaller. We don't really have anything larger than, I want to say, 31 feet outside.
Yeah.
It's really under that.
What I see a lot of times is marinas that don't have large enough facilities to store bigger boats. They just end up, spending the winter outside.
Yeah.
And I know that a lot of people will agree with me when I say this, is that a boat that's stored not only indoors, but a tempered indoor facility, after that 10-year mark, looks like a completely different boat.
Yeah, you don't have that stretching and constriction on your seats, that really puts a lot of tension on the stitching. I know that's a small thing to look at, but 10 years down the line, it does make a difference.
Do you get a lot of guys that will restore their interiors at, like, say, year 10, 12, 15, depending on what condition they're in? Do you see a lot of that?
Depends on the person. I mean,
Yeah.
Some people look at their boats and they really want to take care of them, and other people look at them and say it's just a toy. I don't care. It's all up to the person, and that's you got to give it to them. It's their product. It's their boat. It's how they want to take care of it.
And you talked about that earlier, the boat that sits in the water all year, and you put the moisture reader up to it. If they're getting a survey done, maybe the next owner, they're selling it, and the next owner's getting a survey done. Do you see a lot of wet boats that, in those instances where they sit in the water for extended periods of time, are you seeing a lot of wet boats?
It really depends. Like if you hit something and you don't really say anything to us, it's going to be wet. Once you get that crack in the fiberglass, it just seeps in and then it soaks everything, and that transom needs to get replaced, which is depending on the boat, like a $20,000 job. We don't really get a lot of it, and it also depends on the age of the boat. If you're looking and doing a survey on a boat that's 30, 40 years old, you're probably going to find something that's wet. But if you're doing something on a 5-year-old boat, probably not. It's going to be a spot that's maybe this big.
Yeah, and 9 times out of 10, they're not even going to do anything about it.
Right.
Outside of a survey, what would you say, is a good thing to look out for on a used boat purchase?
A great thing to look out for is the service records, and just go through the basic logs, like preventative maintenance. It's preventative for a reason. And I'm going back to my time as a technician, and this really is why I got into sales. Just do your preventative maintenance, because it's going to save you so much money in the long term. Oil changes and tune-ups and just fluids. That's all you really got to do. And if you're not really religious about it, when you get to that 10-year mark, when you get to 1,000 hours, you're going to start to see problems. And you're going to see problems inside of the motor. A fuel pump that goes just happens. Every once in a while, it can go at 500 hours or 1,000 hours. Maybe it never goes. But if you're never changing your spark plugs, you're probably going to get some loss of power.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen jobs where people have a 15 or 20-year-old boat and they've never been done. And then they don't come out.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, so the way I got into sales and what really drove me to be on this side of it is I was working as a technician over at Mountain View, and we got a call about a guy who was driving through the Governor's Island Bridge and his motor just shut off. So I had to hop in the workboat, drive all the way out there, tow him in, and part of what I do diagnostics-wise is just ask him, like, what was the last thing you did? And he's like, well, oil change. I was like, so have you done anything else? No, I haven't. I was like, you ever done a tune-up? I don't know what that is. I was like, okay, like, did your sales guy tell you to do a tune-up? He's like, no, he didn't tell me any maintenance to do. And so I did the tune-up. He was running. Hour later, he was back on the water. So that was kind of the epiphany moment for me, where I was like, I now have the technical knowledge of all of these boats. I know generally where to guide people. Maybe if I take that, I can run with it in sales. And I mean, so far it's worked out for me pretty well.
I would say what separates a good salesman from a bad salesman is one that tries to understand the boater's objective. Because there's so many salesmen out there that will try to put them in the boat that the customer wants. And that might not be the right way of phrasing it, but when a customer comes in, they say, I want this. Well, you want to understand why they want that.
Yeah.
And there's a ton of sales guys that'll say, hey, listen, I know you want to buy this. Well, I shouldn't say that. There's a ton of sales guys that will come in and just say, yeah, sure, I'll sell you that boat. And then there's the guys that'll ask why and understand, well, you want to do a ton of wakeboarding off of a ski pylon? No, we're not going to. You want to look at a boat with a wakeboard tower. Figuring out the why is definitely super important in sales. And not only just selling the boat, but a full delivery process is very seldomly done correctly in today's boating market.
It's hard. It's hard to do correctly, even for me, even though that's something I really try and push forward, is the white glove service. Whether you're buying a formula or you're buying, my $10,000 boat that someone just threw up there to get rid of. I try and treat everybody the same. And that's kind of the hard part, is we have such an influx of people all at one time. Yeah. So it's like, I want to give you everything I have, but I don't have the time to give it to you. It's, I would be working 24/7 for the next 6 months to be able to give that top level service. So sometimes you got to cut corners, unfortunately.
I think there's, and you can probably relate to this too. It bounces right off of that story you just told, but so many sales guys rely on the service department to educate. And the service department, while their job is to educate, they're not going to show them every single thing they need to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're not. And I think that's really kind of, if you come buy a boat from me, you can call me at any time. I'm happy to run you through any questions. I had a guy call me. He bought a boat from me last spring. And he called me. He's like, Dave, I don't understand this about my registration. Like, am I going to get a title? Because he's from Mass. He's used to getting titles. It's like, you're not going to get a title. Your proof of ownership is your registration. Yeah. And he's like, well, what does that mean when I go to sell it? Like, how am I going to do that? And I ran him through the whole process. And it's like, I'm an open book for you to call, because there's so much involved with this industry and owning a boat that if you don't know, just ask me. I'm more than happy to help out.
There's a lot of guys that represent the industry correctly, and there's a lot of guys that don't.
We get judged off the 5% of people that don't. That's the hard part.
Dude, you know what? It's the 5% of people that have a bad experience. They go and tell all their friends they had a bad experience. But if you go above and beyond for one guy, you go out to his dock first thing in the morning to fix a problem he has, and it's still not fixed. You go out in the afternoon, you get it all resolved. Someone will ask you they'll ask him about Paugus Bay Marina, and I'll be like, yeah, pretty good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that's literally it.
I think that's what's cool about Paugus, is that the people do go the extra mile. They say, no, they're great. Like, really? They're awesome.
Interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I've had so many people come into my office and they're like, hey, the only reason I'm here is because of Corey. Corey has done such a great job. He's always taken care of me in the past. I want to buy a boat from him, but unfortunately I have to work with you. I'm like, well, that's totally fine. I completely understand, but I'm happy to start building a relationship with you and carrying on the same foot. Moving forward, let me do my best for you.
Yeah, there's a reason why Corey put me in this position.
Exactly. And I think that's why I think Paugus and I really align very well, is that maintaining customers and maintaining those relationships and building those relationships with people, because we don't do a lot of advertisement. On our valet list, we have a waiting list of 120 people long, and that's because we can't get rid of any of our customers. They don't want to leave, and when they do leave, they're like, we're leaving just because we found a slip, or they're leaving because they're just done with boating. Yeah. And I think that's the great thing about Paugus is we do such a good job taking care of people. We know everybody by their name. We know their pets, mom, dad, grandparents, kids, everybody. It's awesome to see them.
And with, dealerships like MarineMax coming out and growing, we're losing that sort of mom and pop feel of marine dealerships. Really, that whole dealership model is taking over many different industries. Yeah. And I do believe that there's going to be a resurgence in people looking for more of that, personal experience where you buy a boat or you know everyone on a first name basis that you don't get at some of these chain dealerships. And I'm not speaking poorly of MarineMax or speaking poorly, but they do lose that personal touch with their customers at some point once you become so corporate. So we talk a lot about customer errors. What's one thing you learned on a boat the hard way?
Oh, jeez. Kill switch. Customer comes out and they're calling me crazy. They're like, my boat won't start. I just bought it the other day. I'm like, I don't know what's going on with this thing. I can't figure it out. It's, it's July. It's like 90 degrees, 100% humidity. I'm sweating. It's like 3 p.m.
You're in the engine bay.
Yeah, in the engine bay. It was just running. It's 1,000 degrees in there. You can't figure out why it won't start. Plugging the computer in, doing diagnostics, and then, someone else comes moseying along. You're like, kill switch is off. Like, it's not neutral. Kills you. It kills you.
Some of the newer electronic throttles like Mercury, Volvo, one of the very first things we learned is that when there's no solid mechanical thump that you're in gear, a lot of people can mistake it for being in gear, and nothing happens when you turn the key.
Yeah, nothing. You just click a button.
It'll just beeps.
Yeah, sometimes it'll crank, sometimes it won't. But, 8 seconds and then it's done. And that's actually one of the scary things. When I was working at Mountain View, one of the customers there had just purchased a new pontoon, and they went from the old fly-by-wire to the DTS shifter. And he was telling me, I have a hard time finding neutral on this thing. It's so new. And I just remember that one little tidbit sticking out with the throttle. And they were driving down the channel. First time they came in, their grandson toppled over the front and went between the tunes. And I just remember running out on the dock just screaming, shut it off. Just shut it off. Don't try and find neutral. Just shut it off.
We'll have to do a whole nother segment of marina horror stories, because I know everyone that has about 10.
Yep.
You make a good point. There's no solid thump getting into gear. Our next guest, we're going to talk about a mastercraft that totaled 2 boats because of that. A very uneducated and inexperienced boater. If you want to hear about it, just tune into the next episode.
Yeah, sometimes you'll have that. I mean, it's actually, not really too much of a fault of his own, but let's talk about the licensing. Getting your boater's license. You can get a temporary 14-day license and get thrown in any boat with any horsepower and go. And that's scary. There's no place out here that's doing education.
There's a number of states right now that are doing online education that don't require you to take a proctored exam. And there's even a number of states that don't even require any license at all.
I know.
Correct me if I'm wrong. I believe Florida is one of them where you don't need a boater's license.
So you do need a boater's license down there. And Florida's is actually reciprocal because it's NASBLA approved up
That's
here.
right.
Because I know in New Hampshire you have to be 16 to get your boater's license. Once you turn 16, you need it. But if you're younger, and let's say you're 12 or 13 and you want your boater's license, you can go online and take the test down there, get your boater's license, and it then applies up here in New Hampshire.
So there's a bill right now in the state of New Hampshire that would allow boaters' education to be completely online, where you don't need to go and take a proctored exam. And we're getting a lot of support behind it. As a matter of fact, the New Hampshire Marine Trades Association is going to back it. What are your thoughts on getting your full education online and not having any sort of an in-field experience?
I was able to take my test online and in a class, and I chose to go take it in the class for a reason of you get those little tidbits from the instructor who has experience out on the lake. You don't get that when you're just clicking through online. And I think it makes a night and day difference. So I think you should have to take a class in person because it can be very, very dangerous out on the water. And when it goes bad fast.
You know how you can find out if someone's taken the test online? This is a very simple test.
Is it asking them which way is north?
They usually can figure that one out. Point to a red marker and say which side do you go on.
Here's a great way to remember that is if it's a black marker, you want to be cold, you want to be north and east, and if it's red, you want to be hot, you want to be south and west.
That's exactly how I remember it.
Yeah, that's how I explain it to everybody, and they're like, oh, now it makes sense.
Yeah, red's hot.
We'll be driving out of the channel, and I'm working with a new boater. I'm like, which side of the marker are you supposed to be on? They go, the right side. And I turn around, I say, which side are you supposed to be on? The right side. No, there's a rock over there.
Well, the way that I say it is let me rephrase. If you just say, in a context like we're talking right now with a new boat owner, you'd say, hey, red markers, right? Do you stay right or left of them? And they go, right.
Red right return. Doesn't apply on the lake.
Or if you say, okay, now a black, they're like, oh, you always stay left of black. That's how you know someone that doesn't know how to navigate.
And, I think that's part of the being online. And then I think you really should have to spend at least 5 hours with somebody on the water getting instruction. Because to just get your license and then get handed the keys to this, you have no idea how to drive it. Some people don't even know how to start their boats.
100% recommend some type of on-water training.
Yeah.
Up here, there's a few guys. I don't know if you know Kevin with Captain for Hire.
Yes,
Kevin
I do
McCarthy.
know Kevin. I used to fill up his boat all the time at Mountain View.
Kevin, he started his business up here just doing on the water training, and now he does vessel relocations from state to state, predominantly up and down the East Coast. And he has done some training, for clients of ours when I was working at a dealership. And I'll tell you the difference is night and day, specifically with docking.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of newer boats, people are dropping the dial indicator gauges and switching to Garmin, some type of screen for navionics. Raymarine, Garmin. What are your thoughts on that? My thought right off the bat is that any sort of GPS, integrated GPS, makes navigation during the night much easier.
Yeah, I think it's great. Don't rely on it 100%. Always have a printed map, because if your battery dies or the plug behind the screen comes disconnected, I've seen that happen before. Always have a map, because the map's never going to shut off. So you need to know where you are. But it's great being at night, not like looking around. It all looks the same. So if you can kind of zoom out on that and say, "Oh, I'm generally here. I know where to go."
Yep.
But don't drive by it. Don't say, "I'm on this line here. I'm good." You still need to pay attention. But I think they're really cool. I think they're nice. I think it's a great feature to have. It's making it very easy to navigate, but definitely be safe than sorry.
So jumping ship, moving to service and storage. This is an area that not a lot of guys get into because it's pretty dry, but I think it's important to talk about nonetheless. So you have, from a customer-facing point of view, what's some advice you would give a boat owner who stores their boat with you, or really with anyone, in terms of preparing their boat to get ready for winter storage or preparing it for summerization, getting it in the water?
Probably don't detail it before you put it away, because we got to get into it. We got to winterize it. We got to, summarize it in the spring. So if you detail it in the fall, you're going to probably have to detail it again in the spring. So just wait and do it in the spring. That's probably my number one advice, because everybody who details it in the fall ends up smacking their head against a window or a wall over and over again, trying to just get that detail. But, it just happens. We got 700, at least at our marina, we have 700 boats we have to get through. We have 3 technicians. And we really only have 2.5 months to winterize and then summarize these boats. We're firing them out. We're really trying to move fast. My key advice, from the marina perspective, I know customers want to use their boat as a storage locker, but it's very difficult as a technician to fight through all that stuff when you got, you open up the head and there's life jackets and anchors and floaties and all that stuff. You got to pull all of that out to just dump half a gallon of antifreeze in there. You spend more time pulling this stuff out, putting it back in, than you do actually providing the services. And when you do that over the course of, let's say, 200 boats, it adds a lot of time to what we have to do.
So you just want to make sure you're emptying the boat out.
Yeah, I understand.
Completely.
Yeah, you got a couple life jackets in there, no big deal. But if you're filling every single cupboard with all of your stuff, it's very difficult for us.
One thing, too, is I see a lot of times where people will leave stuff in their boat, and it's wet.
Yeah.
They don't dry out when they're under a seat. They
No.
don't get any drier. As a matter of fact, it's going to make everything around it grow mold and mildew.
Especially if you got some soda cans in there. The ants love soda.
Really?
And the ants will get it. Yeah, once the ants are in the boat, they don't come out.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
So,
I've seen infestations before. It's really bad.
Of ants in a boat?
Yeah, just from leaving, not sponsored by anything, but like a High Noon can that has a bunch of sugar in it. They like that stuff.
Really? So you've seen like ant nests in boats?
Yeah.
Oh, that's so gross.
It's nasty.
One thing, too, I've noticed a lot of people don't do is they don't take their carpets out.
No.
And there's like 2 things that I can see. The 2 things that I've seen have been horrible as a result of that. Number one is that if you leave your carpets in for too long, they eventually stick to whatever's below them. Have you seen that?
I haven't.
I've seen a few cobalts where they have that sort of neoprene backing on the bottom.
Yeah.
And when it gets hot enough, it sticks to the fiberglass or the gel coat on the floor. And then number 2 is mildew.
Yeah, the mildew's gross. That smells. And then you got to bleach it, let it bake in the sun.
Yeah.
It's a whole couple hours.
So is that how you guys clean, dirty carpets? You bleach them and throw them out in the sun?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very diluted amount of bleach. We're not throwing straight bleach on it because then it'll just stain it. But, you mix a little bleach with some stuff, a little Dawn.
Yeah.
And then you just spray it on, scrub it, and then hose it out. And then you let it bake in the sun. And then eventually it goes away.
Yeah.
But over time, at that 10-year mark, it's harder and harder to do because that stain just gets to be more and more prominent.
Bleach is, I would say, more of a restoration tool in our business. We're not using bleach to just like clean a boat, but if there's nothing else that's getting it out, bleach is going to probably take it out.
Bleach is the fail-safe. That's the one that we don't want to do it, but we will if we have to.
If you're watching this right now and you clean your boat with bleach,
try small spots first. You really don't.
Only use it on white interiors, number one.
Yeah.
And number two, don't leave it on for too long.
No, we really are just scrubbing and hosing. That's all we're doing.
And magic erasers are your best friend. Oh, yeah. Magic eraser, don't use anything that's going to strip your wax off of your boat.
Dawn.
Yeah, Dawn dish soap is also going to take wax off. But remember, if you use any sort of harsh soap, you have to reapply wax. So any sort of corrective measure you make, remember that you have to take care of whatever you correct after that. So jumping back to storage, a lot of marinas now where you say you store 700 boats.
Yeah.
A lot of marinas are running into an issue where the boats are on the premises, but they don't know where. Do you have any practices that you guys put in place to map out where all the boats are? Are they in rack storage? Are they, how do you guys do that?
Yeah, so we have 4 big storage buildings. So it makes it super easy for us because we know our cruisers are on the floor and we know we're moving from building 1 to building 2. We move all the boats, shuffle them when we have to do storage service work and stuff like that. But for the ones that are in the rack, it's really easy to keep track of them. We do old school pen and paper and we draw out building 1, left side, right side, building 2, left side, right side, so on and so forth. So we just keep it super simple like that. We probably could use an Excel spreadsheet to make that a little bit faster, but it's easier for us to just draw it out because we know everybody by name. So we're not doing like Cobalt 2002 number 5. We're just doing like Mr. Jones spot over here.
And a lot of guys are storing their boat with you year over year, so they may be in that same spot the next year.
Yeah, they're at least in that same building. Sometimes we'll shift you down one or over to the left another. It depends on what we need to do for space. With turnover with customers, it happens, but few and far between with us. Most people go back into the same spots.
Yeah, no, that's how a lot of marinas do it. What I've seen is if you're in the industry, you may know this, but Speedy Dock. I don't know if you've heard of them before.
Yep, I've heard of them.
It's becoming a really powerful tool. And what's interesting is if you have specifically large rack buildings, that you can put a barcode on the back of the boat and you can have your forklift linked up to the software so that as you're putting a boat away, it can figure out, I'm on the 4th story based off of how articulated the boom is, snap the barcode, and then it's already in Speedy Dock.
Yeah, so we don't do any of that. We are very, very, very old school when it comes to our valet service.
There's nothing wrong with that.
There isn't. We want to see your shining faces when you come to the marina and come pick up your boat. You walk in. We don't put your boat in the water unless you call us and tell us, like, we're going to be here at 5 a.m. or we're not going to be at the marina until 7 p.m. Unless you show up at the marina, we're not putting the boat in the water. Because, we got 26 slips. If we have 20 people call us at 4th of July, say, let's put our boat in the water. 95% of our building empties that day. That's a lot of boats that we got to put in and take out. So if we have to put an extra 2.5% of those boats in the water to then pull them back out for non-use, it creates a lot of extra work.
What do you think about Boat Club? Did you guys ever do that? You got the right brand for it.
We do have the right brand for it. Maybe. But I don't think we would join them. We'd probably start our own boat club. Yeah, we may have something in the works where we might start something like that, have one boat with a couple different owners, and go from there. Not really sure. It's really like when I say it's in the works, like we mentioned the idea.
So one of the most interesting things I've learned about Freedom Boat Club is that they strive to have 10 members per boat. That's the magic number. So if you have a boat in Boat Club, chances are if you're joining it early, there's some advantages, but Boat Club, you'll get 10 owners per rental boat. So if there's 160 people, you can count on that operation have about 16, maybe 17 boats. And the way that their bookings work is that you book basically half-day segments, and think of it as like a cookie jar. So you've got 4 cookies in your cookie jar, and each cookie represents a half a day. You can use those half a days, only 4 of them, to book in advance. So let's say today is, what's today? Monday, February 24th. I want to rent on 4th of July, right? I want the whole day on 4th of July. I've used half of my available credits just to lock up that one day. So if I also want to use it, let's say Memorial Day weekend, I have no additional credits until I burn through the credits that I already have. So it resets after you've used them. It's kind of an interesting system, and it may have changed since the last time I was educated on it, but essentially you have to use your credits before you can go out and reserve again. So let's paint the picture. Say it's 4th of July and you have family coming up at the end of August. And you want to make sure that you have a boat ready for the end of August. You can only book 2 days, and you can't book any additional days in between there and now. But on a day-to-day basis, if you show up at the marina, say they've got, hey, listen, it's a slow day, no one's taking the boats out, you can take a boat out there, and then but you can't reserve it in advance, which I've always thought was interesting.
Yeah, that is kind of interesting. It kind of seems like if you're a planner, you're getting, I like to plan things out.
Yeah.
I like to have a schedule.
Yeah.
So it seems like if you're that kind of a person, you get hindered for it. You got to be a spur of the moment, show up and see what you get.
Yeah, I mean, it's the values there. I think it's attracting a lot of people to boat ownership, which is great.
Yeah, I mean, you got none of the worries about owning a boat. You don't have to worry about any of the service.
I think it's a great stepping stone because you've got these families that maybe they're just not there yet.
Yeah, it's perfect for those first-time boat buyers who want to go try out a bunch of different models and see what you like. Compare a center console, a pontoon boat, traditional fiberglass bow rider, a cuddy cabin.
All for a fraction of the cost of buying.
Yeah, you got no sweat.
And you can use it wherever you want to use it.
Yeah.
So wherever they have, I think the 2 big right now are Carefree and Freedom Boat Club. Mm-hmm. Those are the big contenders. You've got some more local level stuff, like, if you've got more local level stuff. Mm-hmm. But that's one area that is interesting is we've got Brunswick and Boats Group.
Yeah.
They're buying up all these franchises. I forget which, and sorry, I'm not very educated on this, but I know that they own one of them, one or the other. What's your thoughts on sort of the Brunswick/Boats Group takeover of the marine industry?
I really like them as a company.
Yeah.
I think they've done a very good job as a business being able to grow and scale and keep up with their level of service. As far as like what I use them for specifically with the sales manager aspect, Boat Trader, I don't use them anymore. It just got too expensive. We got priced out of the market.
And you're talking about boats.com.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Boats.com, Boat Trader, Yacht World, those are all the same. They're all owned by the same company.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. We just don't use them anymore. They're too expensive for us. I mean, we don't do that large of a volume to be able to shovel that much hay into that fire.
They've done a really good job with their tangible products. I mean, Mercury's a great brand.
Boston
Whaler's a great brand. Like,
yeah.
They've got all these rock star brands, but their digital marketplace is, I don't have the actual statistics to prove this, but I talk to a lot of guys, and they're not happy with the digital products whatsoever.
Yeah, I mean, they took over and had a lot of people, and they kind of, I would say, had a monopoly on the industry there because everybody used them and everybody really liked them. But then they kind of doubled their pricing, right? And if they lose 25% of their customers but still double their prices, then they've increased their revenue. So from a business perspective, that's good, but it weeds out all the small guys like us.
They doubled more than once.
Yeah.
Because again, I don't know what our viewership's going to look like or listeners are going to look like, but we'll just say it out loud. It was like $800 a month for the longest time, and then COVID hit. It went up to like $1,200. Okay, whatsoever. Then it went up to $1,800. Mm-hmm. Okay, then it went up to like $2,800.
Yeah,
and that's when people started to say, "Well, hold on a second." Mm-hmm. And then it went to like $3,600, and the results that it was providing were just not great.
It was the same. And what's really unfortunate is we got rid of them. I came into the office and I said, all right, what do we have? What do we got to work with? And what do I have to shift? So that's kind of how you and I met, is that, I wanted to revamp our finance department because it wasn't moving as fast as I needed it to go.
Yep.
I was waiting 3 weeks for financing to close. And
Which,
that was,
for the record, we can close in 3 days now.
yeah, which is phenomenal. It used to, 3 weeks to 3 days. That's quite a jump.
Yeah.
And so I looked at kind of everything, and I asked Corey, I was like, how's this work for you? He's like, I don't really know. So I asked the guy who I replaced, I was like, how's this working? He goes, it's okay. And I was like, why don't we just get rid of it? Seems like it's costing us a huge chunk of change to have this. And he's like, all right, we'll get rid of it. So the only thing I had at that point was the website to generate leads. So what I did was I put everything on Facebook Marketplace, which is, you deal with a lot of people who are just asking questions, which is fine. If you want to ask a question, more than happy to answer them. In just doing our website and Facebook Marketplace, I actually increased our sales.
That's incredible.
And I lowered our cost. So I increased our revenue through that as well.
You cut all the fat out. Mm-hmm. You did what Elon Musk just did to the federal government.
I'm the Elon Musk of August Bay Marina. Yeah, which I think was actually really crazy. Even though I was going up with interest rates that were at 8% and an election year, I was still able to increase from the year prior to what we were doing now with cutting revenue and increasing our volume. It's insane.
What are your thoughts on the election year? Do you think that sales decrease in the boat business on election year? Because
Absolutely.
everyone denies it, but I can say that it's 100% accurate.
No, it affects everybody. You see across all industries at least a 30% decrease. Nobody wants to do anything.
Well, there's the biggest fear is the fear of the unknown.
Yeah.
And if you boil it down to everything that anyone could be possibly afraid of is quite frankly the unknown, and the unknown is an election because you don't know what's going to be the result of that. Now that people know what's happening, they know what's going on, I would say buyer confidence has increased. And would you say your sales have shown, or at least maybe interest in boats has increased since the closure of the election?
So we'll talk about the results of the election. We'll talk about 2 weeks before, and then we'll talk about 2 weeks after. 2 weeks before the election finished, 0 calls. I had nothing. 2 days after the election closed, I had 20 calls.
So we've talked about a bunch of different topics today. One of my favorite things to ask is, what is the best boating advice that you've ever been given to close up this episode?
Oh, I've gotten a lot of advice.
It can be more than one. It can be 4 or 5 pieces of solid information or solid,
The best advice that I've ever been given is only go as fast as you want to hit the dock. That one is probably tried and true.
That's a very, very, very good one.
Yeah. And then, if you're out, that's for docking. And then if you're out on the water, if you don't know, don't go. Or if you don't know, go slow. Because if you're going faster and you hit something at 35 miles an hour, your outdrive is gone. But if you hit it at maybe 5 miles an hour, you're just going to bang up some props and a skeg.
Yeah,
limits your cost of damage.
The difference of hitting something at 5 miles an hour versus 55 miles an hour is drastically different.
Yep. I had a customer over at Mountain View, was guessing on which side of the buoys to be on, went through them, knocked his drive right off. Yeah.
One of my favorites is if you have to make a decision on left or right and you don't know and you don't have time to slow down, maybe you're in a situation where it's shallow, hug the buoy.
Get close.
Get as close as you possibly can. Because chances are if you're only 8 feet away on the other side, that's basically the width of the boat, it's not going to cause as much damage.
Yeah.
Or if any.
Yeah.
But anyways, that's going to wrap up our episode 1 of Prop Talk Podcast. Check us out on Spotify, YouTube, and don't forget our Instagram handle is prop.talk.podcast. Thanks so much.